I'm thinking of another upcycling project this time. I had this t-shirt forever and I think it's time to do some upgrading for fall. I'm drawing a simple design here and I want to keep this original letter sign as it is. My design is a simple pumpkin with a little heart and a stem on top. So it sounds like "Hey Pumpkin." These dotted lines are to sew on top to show the ribs on the pumpkin skin. For this project, we'll need some pins, a pair of scissors, fabric of your choice, craft fuse, and our pattern. First, let's cut our pattern parts out. Make sure you use your paper cutting scissors for this part. As I said, this is really a simple pattern and it's only got 3 pieces. Since this t-shirt already has a design, I don't want to make things more complicated. I have already ironed my t-shirt and the fabric pieces I'm going to use. And these are all pre-washed. Now pin your pumpkin pattern to the fabric. And carefully cut around it. I'm using this black and white check fabric for the pumpkin because I don't want it to go all orangey yellowish since we already got some of that in the letter sign. I know that not everyone has this kind of t-shirt, so you can make a bigger pumpkin pattern to cover a larger area of your t-shirt. For the heart and the stem, I have selected this canvas fabric and I simply draw around it using a fabric marking pen. And then carefully cut out the pieces. Now this is how my design is gonna look at the end. Before we patchwork these to our garment, these will need some steadiness to hold it straight. So I'm using a craft fuse for that, and it's Pellen 808 style. If you have heat bonded adhesive, you can simply use that. Place the fabric on top of the interface and roughly cut around it. I'm only using the interface for the pumpkin and for the stem. Since the heart goes on top of the pumpkin, I don't think it's gonna need any. Using the instruction on the interface, you can fuse the interface to these fabric pieces. In this case, I have to place the shiny part of the interface and the fabric pieces facing each other, and then simply iron it to fuse. Now carefully cut the excess interface pieces around the fabric like this. Place the pumpkin pieces as the way you like on the t-shirt. As you can see, I have tucked the stem underneath the pumpkin to hide the one end of the stem and pin it to the top fabric layer. This step is really easy if you got heat bond. Then you can simply iron it to the t-shirt. I'm working with what I have in hand and I don't think it's a big deal since these pieces are not that hard to handle. We are only pinning these two at this point. Now we are going to sew around this entire pumpkin. Use a matching thread, or if you want to stand out, use a completely different color thread to sew. Start at any point and remember to do a little back stitch at the beginning and at the ending as well. Sew closer to the margin of the pumpkin and go a little slow. Then it will be easier to move the fabric as you go. Trim the threads at the end. I only sew around the pumpkin, and next we can sew around the stem as well. Before we sew the heart piece, I'm gonna sew along these pumpkin ribs as I showed in the design. You can use a fabric marking pen to draw those on your fabric. But I don't think it's really gonna help because of the color of the fabric I have used. So I'm basically just gonna eyeball it and sew. Easiest way to sew is starting from this point to this point. And again from this point to this point on the other side. You can also sew some straight lines or do some freestyle sewing for the stem as well. I'm going to draw a few lines to make it easier. Now start to sew along those marked rib lines. This project is really simple and there is no right or wrong way to do it. Just add your own touch to it. Finish the sewing by a bit of backstitch. Now the other side. Starting from here to here. Because I'm using a white color thread, you can see the ribs clearly. By doing so, it gives a little embossed-like look to our design. Actually, I can also sew the lines on the stem at this point. And go back down. And trim the threads. The only thing now we have to do is sewing this heart piece, and you can place it wherever you like. Sew around and on top of it freely. With that done, we are all good with our t-shirt upcycling project. Since I have used a heat erasable fabric marking pen, I'm gonna iron the t-shirt to get rid of those marked lines. And it's all done. Now this is how it finally looks, and this is a really easy project. Use whatever you have in hand, and you can also hand sew this easily. Doing these kind of little projects lets your mind to be creative and spend your time in a very peaceful way. Thank you for watching, and I'll join you in the next one.